So I've been regretting the title of this talk ever since I suggested it, because I'm finding it really hard to find an appropriate angle to talk about it. And I think it's because what I've realised finally, even as late as this morning, thinking about how the hell am I going to talk about this, is that I've conflated two separate issues. We obviously need value growth targets, so the $100 billion bit. Every business, when they're trying to grow, has a business plan, a target that they work to. Agriculture is no different as an industry. And the figure that we have on that is important in terms of the way that we communicate to government, particularly, about the size of the industry relevant to resource allocation and so on. But we can get caught up in whether that target is appropriate or not as a stretch target, as something that is ambitious but achievable. I've seen, I think over the couple of days of ABARES so far, 3 or 4 different predictions on whether that target is achievable, what an appropriate target it is. You know, there's numerous ways that you can try and work that out, depending on where you start and where you finish and the different growth rates and so on. But the more important bit for me is the transformational bit, and how we are actually going to make agriculture look, touch, feel and smell different than what it is now, so that we actually achieve real growth and real transformational growth, and really just aiming at a figure to do that rather than the things that underpin that growth and the behavioural changes and the cultural changes and all the bits and pieces that go to make that up. Are much more important, and by focusing on those and just forgetting about the figure for a minute, I genuinely believe that $100 billion will be left in the dust if we are able to achieve all the metrics that are in the 2030 roadmap from NFF. So that's what I'm going to really concentrate on today and go into a bit of detail around those and why I think that'll happen. So what happens when you do get a transformational target right? Amazing things. The moonshot. You know, JFK, beginning of the 60s, humans will walk on the moon and return safely to Earth by the end of the decade. Completely unfeasible when it was first proposed. But it happened. They did it. And the reason that happened was 2 things. First of all, it captured the imagination of the public. It didn't just capture the imagination of the scientists and the people that were tasked with actually doing it, but it captured the imagination of the nation, of the world. It was full of amazing imagery, of fantastic imagination that brought everyone along and got everyone on board. And the second important thing, though, was that there was a really serious burning platform underneath this, which was that if America didn't do it, Russia would do it. You know, it was the height of the Cold War, and that was a very real risk. Now, we have a burning platform in agriculture. Too often when we talk about the 100 billion target or any growth target or anything to do with where agriculture is positioned at the moment, we talk about the opportunity as being, you know, somehow the burning platform, but that's not the burning platform. The burning platform is the fact that everyone in the world is looking at that opportunity. And we genuinely run the risk of becoming irrelevant in meeting that opportunity if we don't realise that, if we don't realise the urgency that we need to look at that opportunity to be competitive with every other country that's trying to do the same thing. So I think the burning platform is there, and it needs to be a bit more evident in the way that we embrace it and realise the need for change. But the imagination bit, you know, what's the target in doing this? How is agriculture going to do this? Is going to respond to this burning platform that will genuinely capture the imagination of not just agriculture but of the public altogether. $100 billion is frankly meaningless. It means virtually nothing to most people on the street. It's just a big number. It's not relevant to them. But the bits underpinning it and the language underpinning it and particularly in today's environment of declining community trust for agriculture, are really important. Now, the NFF roadmap is made up of 5 different pillars, and I'll go through each of them and some of the metrics that are in there in terms of how those pillars are going to be met. And the first one is customers and the value chain. And the metrics for success, one of the metrics for success in there, is that agriculture is ranked as Australia's most trusted industry. Now, just think about that for a minute in the context of today's lack of trust and how transformational that would be and how difficult that's going to be to get there, to go to Australia's most trusted industry. Now, farmers are trusted, but increasingly the business of farming is not. And when a lot of people think about farming, this is the sort of imagery they think about, and they don't think about it in a good way. And this is having enormous impact on the externalities around agriculture that are affecting our ability to increase productivity. Things like ethical investments, things like regulation of plant breeding techniques or crop protection chemicals. The Aussie Farms platform that's come out recently. All of these things are genuine and serious threats to growth and getting near that $100 billion target unless agriculture can become trusted, and not just trusted, but the most trusted industry. And so once the community starts thinking more about agriculture with this sort of imagery, that it's about beautiful landscapes, that it's about producing fantastic food and fibre in a trusted, partnered way, then we take the shackles off a lot of the change that we're trying to achieve at the moment. When agriculture suggests new things and new techniques, they're not going to be scary and threatening, but they're going to be exciting and innovative because they're coming from a trusted partner. So things like new plant breeding techniques, they're seen as a way that agriculture continues to deliver those trusted goods and those trusted services. The use of crop production products, the same way. Efficient animal production techniques. So, right from the start, in terms of that very first metric that's in the roadmap, is one of the most transformational changes for agriculture, I think, that there is at the moment, that if we can achieve that. The second pillar is growing sustainably. And some of the metrics in here, again, use language and imagery and ideas that I think a great deal of the community, of the public, would be very surprised and not immediately associate with agriculture. That Australian agriculture is trending towards carbon neutrality by 2030, that we're going to halve food waste by 2030. These, again, are really important things that in terms of bringing the community to understand that agriculture can be a trusted partner that meets the values that they have, and starts to alleviate some of these new institutional threats that are threatening the growth, threatening the productivity of agriculture. And once we get that trust, then one of the other metrics under that pillar, which is a net benefit of ecosystem services, so payments for ecosystem services, is equal to 5% of farm revenue. Now that's essentially an entirely new industry that's being proposed, payments for ecosystem services. And if we get to $100 billion, then that's a $5 billion industry, which is will be the 5th biggest agricultural sector, will be payments for ecosystem services. That's only going to be allowed if the community understanding of agriculture is that it does deliver those services, that they're a trusted partner in doing that, that their understanding of how to deliver those those values that the community desires is real. It's, so again, a huge transformational change, a huge trust that's required, but also a big transformational change within the agricultural community itself. There is a lot of scepticism about this sort of approach within a lot of the farming community. They look at the European example and look at what they regard now as farmers just being paid as land managers with really productivity not part of the equation. And there is a risk, there is always a risk, that if this sort of scheme is not implemented properly, that could potentially happen. However, I think we're so far from that at the moment that there's got to be a midpoint where we can get this sort of outcome without still retaining good, productive agriculture in the meantime. But when you've got an agriculture sector where the fifth biggest industry is potentially ecosystem services, or the fifth biggest sector is ecosystem services, again, that is truly transformational. Agriculture will look, touch, smell and feel different if that's actually happening by 2030. Pillar 3 is unlocking innovation. Now, we've heard again this morning from Senator Colbeck, and Minister Littleproud yesterday released the EY review into Australia's ag innovation system. Rob's mentioned it already. There is this long-term criticism about Australia being poor at converting research outputs into innovative new products and services. It's an obvious one to address. However, everyone that talks about what we need to do to get better and deliver more innovative products and services talks about culture, talks about culture change, talks about how our innovation culture is not the same as other countries. Now, everyone knows cultural change is really bloody difficult. Michael Robertson yesterday in the session on the innovation system talked about the change that CSIRO is endeavouring to go through, becoming more of a impact-oriented organisation and having a focus around impact and delivery. Talked about a decadal process within that organisation to get that sort of culture change to the point where they are truly focused on innovation and delivery of innovation. So again, a really worthy, important, significant goal, and a transformational one, but a difficult one of the hard choices. And the practicalities of doing this, one of the other metrics that every Australian farm has access to infrastructure and skills to connect to the Internet of Things. I'm sure that most farmers, or a lot of farmers certainly, would look at that very simple thing and just immediately go, well, that's even much more harder than $100 billion. You know, the connecting our farm out, wherever it might be, to the internet so that we can participate in the Internet of Things. So there's all those very real, very practical things that need to go on to be able to achieve that as well. Pillar 4 is capable people and vibrant communities. The metrics are doubling the number of tertiary and vocational ag graduates by 2030, increasing the available workforce by 25%, gender parity in the ag workforce, and very importantly, but again incredibly hard to achieve, unfortunately, zero farm fatalities. Now imagine again, if all of those were actually reached by 2030, how different farms, how different regional communities, how different towns would have to look to be able to do it. Talking to some of the ag recruitment agencies that are here, so we are seeing this resurgence of interest in agriculture, and we are seeing very capable people interested in getting into agriculture. But capable people, coming in family units with partners that are generally well educated and very capable as well, trying to get them into regional communities and small towns is extremely difficult. And it's one of the big challenges that the recruitment companies are having. So this is a really broad, ambitious goal that is not just about getting people employed on farms. It is genuinely about changing the fabric of regional communities so that they're attractive places that families want to go and live there, to bring the people in to be employed in farms and farm businesses and rural businesses. Incredibly important, very, very difficult, and again, a very hard choice about how we get there, how we make those towns attractive. Pillar 5, capital and risk management. So Rob finished off his presentation talking about this, and I'm going to back it up as being one of the most absolutely critical bits to get right, to get anywhere close to being able to achieve 100 billion. But again, sort of emphasise the bit about how different and how much of a cultural change will actually be required to achieve this. It's not just about alleviating risk so we get to that growth target. It's actually about how farm businesses are going to have to think differently, change their behaviour, understand risk and have the financial and literacy skills to understand how to manage that. We need the products there. We don't actually even have a lot of the products that we need compared to other countries. There's a lot of market failure in this environment at the moment for commercial risk mitigation products. So getting them developed and then getting the farm businesses and the people employed in agriculture to have the capabilities and the understanding to be able to use them, that change culture, again, is going to make agriculture look different than what it does now. Because these are the realities of agriculture. You know, going from the previous slide to this one, which is just what northwest Queensland has been through at the moment, with potentially up to 500,000 cattle dead. We're not going to avoid that. That's a risk that's always going to be evident. But where we need to get to is a point where something like this happening is always going to have a huge emotional impact. But we need to get to the point where it's understood as a reality of farming that the risk management, the business management is in place so that while it does have an emotional impact, the financial impact is planned, is catered for. We can deal with it. And it doesn't, it's de-risked to an extent where it doesn't impact on things like new capital entering agriculture, the involvement of the superannuation funds. If we can do all of that, we will achieve that moonshot. You know, all of those things put together, any one of them really, is going to be transformational and difficult. But all of them together, if all of those are achieved by 2030, I really genuinely believe we'll make $100 billion insignificant. We'll exceed it with ease. Thank you.